Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 30. Believe it or not, this is Episode 82 of Our Mind on Music. I am really happy this week to be speaking with Mark Gatland and Malcolm Galloway of Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate. Malcolm Galloway and I have spoken once before on Our Mind on Music. In the episode, you will see a QR code that you can scan to access that episode as well. I believe that was in Season 1 of Our Mind on Music. Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate is a fantastic project, primarily from these two talented musicians. And they do have some collaborators that we will mention in the episode as well. Their latest album is called The Uncertainty Principle. I was really taken by their music over a year ago when I first heard it, and I think if you give this music a listen, you'll understand why. Without further ado, here's my chat with Mark and Malcolm from Hats Off Gentlemen, It's Adequate. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Our Mind on Music. For you, Malcolm, it's the second time. For you, Mark, it's the first time.
My first time, yeah. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks very much for all your support, yeah.
You know, honestly, I've listened to quite a lot of your music since, of course, before you and I talked, Malcolm. And listening to this album again, I'm really just so impressed by what you guys have managed to do.
Thank you.
The songs are fantastic. The sounds are fantastic. The thought that goes behind it. You know, you've just released a video, The Think Tank.
That's it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, even just the video itself, you know, I was like, it's just very creative look, you know.
I was casually perfecting the casualty projections, radiating impact zones, simple blocks of people's hopes, finished calculating perfect distribution to maximize fatalities.
Yeah, it's the whole thing sort of comes together for me, musically, lyrically.
Thank you very much.
So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
So maybe we can start off, for anyone who isn't familiar with you and your music or didn't watch our previous discussion, maybe you could just start off by introducing a little bit about how you guys started working together, the name of the group of the project. How did that start?
Yeah, I mean, we're old school friends. We've known each other since we were like 11 or 12 years old.
So many decades.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I look young, but yeah, we've been playing music since we were 11 years old in the school music room. Just picking up. I was picking up a double bass, and Malcolm was on piano doing covers of Queen and Iron Maiden in the lunch break. And then we become, friends ever since. We've remained friends ever since. Malcolm went off to be a doctor for a few decades.
A pathologist, right?
And I went to working music shops and play in other bands as well. And then, Malcolm can tell you the story about how we got back together musically, which has been going for what, about 12-ish years?
Yeah, that's about right. So as Mark said, I had a little distraction of I was a neuropathologist and medical school teacher, and I was always still involved with music, but more on the classical side and writing about music, and rather than actually doing some my own playing so much. And then I took part in a hospital pantomime, and I got encouraged from that to do more singing and performing, and so I started then. I mean, I had been doing songwriting that I wasn't doing anything with beforehand, because I didn't really feel I had a singer to work with, and then after getting the encouragement from the local pantomime role, I suppose it gave me a bit of a bit more confidence to go and start doing initially open mics, then small featured slots, and small gigs of playing my own songs acoustically. And then Mark came to one of those gigs, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Dark clouds on the horizon, Black clouds touch the sea. Glass winds blow me closer, but I'm going nowhere.
I would be very shy about asking somebody to play with me. I wouldn't want anybody to feel kind of obliged or like they're doing it as a favour that is then become too awkward to say no or something. So I would find it quite difficult to actually ask somebody to want to play with me. But it was nice that Mark, I've always had great respect for as a musician. He's got a great ear, and we've played together over the years so long that we know what the other person's going to do very easily.
It's very intuitive, isn't it? It's basically our relationship musically.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was speaking with someone recently about being in the same group with someone for a long time, and there are sort of pluses and minuses about doing that. If you're in a group with someone, it's great that you know exactly what they're going to do next, but sometimes it takes a little bit of the spontaneity out of it, knowing what they're going to do next.
You said earlier that it became boring to stay with that group. Why is what you're doing now not boring when that was?
Because I can change musicians whenever I like, and it tends to get into a format, because we were together much longer than the public knew us. I've been playing with Paul since I was 15. It's a long time we spent together in all the most extraordinary circumstances, from lousy rooms to great rooms.
Mm-hmm. And have you guys ever had that feeling? Or
no, not really, because the songs that Malcolm sends me, there's so much going on in them, and they're so varied that that's the spontaneity aspect, I think, anyway. And then it's up to me to put on whatever I feel needs doing to it as well. So it's a complete open book as to how I can approach the Hats Off songs that Malcolm sends over. And then when we play live as well, even though we're playing to a laptop, we're playing to a backing track, so there's only two of us go out live. We're quite spontaneous in how we approach those gigs.
Yeah.
But, it's very sort of energetic, and it's all sort of vibe we've got. We're quite energetic performers on stage.
And as I said, it can be very variable depending on how the interaction with the room, on how we feel at the day, how the audience feels on the day, the room, the venue. So, you might expect it to all sound very similar if given that we've got timing constraints of using the laptop. Yeah. But in terms of note choices, how angry something is, the same song might be, half spoken or might be screamed, basically, depending on what feels right at the time, and then that how we play affects what the other person does. So it does feel, as far as something with a laptop could be almost jazzy, and not in terms of the sound, but in terms of that interaction.
Yeah.
I'd find it hard to see how we could be more like that while still having that context of using our pre-recorded parts to allow it to be pragmatic for us to play our stuff live.
Even the way we record stuff as well. I mean, it's very free-flowing, isn't it, the way we work? And nothing's off the table. Everything's up for discussion, and we'll try everything, before we find a thing that works. We don't so we are spontaneous in that sense as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. So Because I was thinking, how could that be, when you first said that, how could that be spontaneous if you're playing to a laptop? But then actually, the only limitation that you have is the rhythmic or the tempo, actually.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise, how you react within that tempo could be completely different. Like the tone and, like you've said, the attack on the vocal, or, whether or not you use distortion. I mean, that could
Yeah.
Yeah.
completely change the
Even
sound.
how I play the bass, because I can obviously
Yeah.
play bang on the beat, or I can play just ahead of the beat, or just behind the beat, because the beat's always going to be there.
Right.
That's not going to change. It's how I interpret it, depending on the gig.
Yeah, as we haven't got a drummer, it's quite handy. At least the clapping's in tune.
Nothing is a neutral. Quiet is compliance when convenience prioritized.
That's really interesting, because I really was, when I was listening to you say that initially, I was thinking, how could you possibly be spontaneous? Now that you're saying this, I'm thinking, of course, it's only one of the aspects of the song, one of the elements of music that's locked in, and the rest of it you can just now have fun on how much you can change that.
Yeah. But we still do, we still can play just the two of us without a laptop. We've been talking about the idea of just doing a piano-based gig, and just
We won't have any electronics, just spontaneous. Yeah.
Yeah, just bass, piano, and a vocal, and see where that goes. Because that's how we used to play when we first started out. I'll be 12. So.
I walked away, left him in the gutter with a pamphlet crumpled.
I thought it was very interesting, that point about freedom within constraints. I can't remember. There was something, I think something Stravinsky said along the lines of how the constraints on the freedom are something that's integral to the actual work that is produced. Where you sit within the beat can make a huge difference to the feel of a performance. And similarly with a vocal, because we know the laptop isn't going to listen to us and change, it does mean that we can play around with where we are with the beat without worrying that we're going to throw off
The drummer.
So sometimes I will be deliberately sitting back into a beat in terms of the vocal delivery, which gives a very different interpretation to the words to if you're anticipating the beat. It gives that urgency, anxiety. It's a different feel without worrying that you're going to throw someone off. That you've actually got some extra freedom because of the constraint.
Yeah, it's quite elastic, isn't it? The whole thing's elastic, basically.
Yeah. And also when you're saying about knowing how the other person's going to respond, and I do appreciate it might be a little unfair for Mark sometimes, that I can be a little bit unpredictable in what's going to come out of my face or guitar. In that, it's very spontaneous, and so what a guitar solo might completely change, or I might, if it feels right, just then pull out a guitar part to leave something sparse, if that's what feels right in a live performance at the time. I would very much change, for example, the fingerings of a chord, whether it's a bar chord or an open chord, according to what feels right at the time, rather than what was on the album, right? For example, and because we know each other well, we know that the other person isn't going to be thrown by us doing something very different.
Right. Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking now. I've changed the way that I'm seeing this now. just from the first couple of comments that you made. But I'm thinking, like, here in this classroom, I try to work with students on how improvisation works, right? And they say, but you're just making it up. I said, nah, not really, because I've already got my whole toolkit that of choices, or if you want to use it as paintbrushes and colors, however you want to compare it. And one thing that happens is when I do go a little off script with the band in here, sometimes it does throw them because they're not experienced in that type of music. So, I go a little off the beat, and that, I see the drummer trying to follow me. I'm like, okay, I know I'm the teacher in the classroom, but I'm improvising, and you've got your role and I've got my role. It's a round table, So
It's
it's
because
really
you're speaking a
interesting.
different dialect at that time, because music is a language, obviously, and you're speaking a different dialect to.
And
once you're on the same page, and you say you've got the same toolbox that you're working with, then the conversation becomes easier.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why I do that, right? That's the whole point, is for me to play behind the beat and see if they can roll with it, and if not, that we stop and we talk about now what,
Or and sometimes in improvisation things go wrong, mistakes happen, and that can be a source of interesting material. That if you can embrace the edge of chaos aspect of it, that sometimes happy accidents occur, which are creatively interesting.
Yeah, a friend of mine used to say that all the time, like, mistakes happen, and then what do you do with it? But he also said, like, is like when you're sharing ideas, sometimes you say, is this idea crazy? Yes, but is it crazy enough? So it's kind of, I mean, it's the whole concept actually of your album, if I'm not mistaken. I'm jumping all the way back to
That's fine,
the last song. Good, I'm being uncertain here. But really, the very last section of lyrics in the song is of living with uncertainty. If we can learn to live with uncertainty, we can learn to cope with reality. And then the very last line,
I might be wrong.
Honestly, I'm hearing that in everything that you're saying about the way that you record together, the way that you are playing this together. And I just thought, wow, like, I really think for anybody who's watching this right now, I would strongly suggest that you take the time to listen to it through the whole song stack from song 1 to song 11, because it really takes you on a journey. I really feel like it took me through to something, and then it explained to me, how could I see this, the uncertainty and the chaos, as potentially something that I should welcome, because it's part of life. And if you're trying to hide that, then it's like trying to hide your feelings until the steam comes out of your ears, because it has to come out somehow,
I would agree with that. I mean, my feeling about the end song, I mean, I like that we've, it's a fairly thematically quite intense and serious but I quite like that it's got a fairly positive ending. We do try, although we cover fairly serious type issues, we try and end the albums on something that's not too bleak. This particular,
we talked about that fairly early on, didn't we, Malk, as well?
We don't
ending to it.
And we also didn't want it to be just like imagine in a film where somebody has like an unearned victory and a happy ending, and then it feels a bit hollow, and that's not what we're going for. And also didn't just want to make it an ironically positive song.
Look at ourselves with an open mind and watch ourselves say, my time. Learn to live with no guarantee in a life that's free of certainty. To look at ourselves with an open mind and say, I might be wrong.
We're very good at understanding that other people may be wrong. And we're often very good at expressing that quite vocally. The people with whom we disagree, or people who look different, or they're different groupings we make of ourselves. But we are, as a species, not particularly good at recognizing that we also may be wrong. And so that's one of the things that I was really trying to get at with that song is, it's okay to be angry with other people who are doing bad things, but we should also recognize that we ourselves are also vulnerable to making errors, being misunderstood, causing harm unintentionally. And I think we just start from the point of, okay, I might be wrong. Let's find out what you think, and then explore. Relate back to when I was a university medical school teacher, and I used to teach and research on causes of errors, diagnostic errors. And one of my areas of interest was about overconfidence, excessive certainty. It doesn't tend to be a theme that I see being covered that much in, art. There's a lot of stuff of, you need to be confident and believe in yourself, and that kind of concept obviously is more likely to inspire a driving rock anthem. It's easier to write a lyric saying, believe in yourself. Whereas if every assertion you have to put lots of parentheses saying, but actually you might be wrong, I might be wrong, it's not so easy to get into a lyrical structure.
It's a little bit like putting musically dissonance in your music, right? Like 4 chords of awesome.
All the greatest hits from the past 40 years just use 4 chords. These 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4 chords.
Sorry, let me...
Do you recognise this?
That is Don't Stop Believing by Journey.
It's a great song.
Very original.
There's a few more that
song.
fit. Check it out.
My life is brilliant. My love is pure. I saw an angel.
If you do that for your whole song, people will quickly get tired of it. A little bit like a candy or too much candy, And it's a little bit like conceptually the lyrics that you're talking about here. It's not always easy to hear and easy to know that we could be wrong, and that, whereas like you just said, like if you have a song that chants "Believe in yourself," everybody would say, "Of course, yes, I love this song." And I remember you talking about that in Misdiagnosis, and when we chatted last time, we were talking about that, and it was very often because of overconfidence. So all of that makes sense to me, and it's, I don't know, I found your mix musically and lyrically, I found everything that you did on this album especially, and I'm not taking away anything from the other albums, I've just listened to this a lot.
Well, thank you.
And I found it all really ties together, because there are moments where, okay, for example, the Uncertainty Principle, you start off with this music that sounds very sort of tentative. It was almost like there was something sinister about to happen. And then, like 1 minute in, beautiful flute part. And it's like, I was going, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then my ears got the candy that they were hoping for. Managed to do that really well throughout the whole thing. There are these heart-rocking moments, but then there's this epic guitar solo that made me think of David Gilmour, Pink Floyd. Sort of the complexity, there's so much happening there that can be, in my opinion, for my music career, can be overdone. It can be where every other measure there's a whole new section that starts, and I'm like,
it's a balance, isn't it? It's getting that balance right, where you're just leaving enough for people to hang on to something for a bit before you go somewhere else and take them on a different bit of the journey.
Right. And then, the Ultraviolet Catastrophe, in those first 3 songs especially, everything changed in the Ultraviolet Catastrophe more than the others. I felt just the rhythm. There was like this amazing groove thing happening.
So it seems that small things are strange. Jump, shell, cloud here and not.
I was listening to Inside the Atom,
Mm.
and I was like, okay, so this is, to me, a musical representation of what that would look like. The electrons jumping and from sphere to sphere,
Yes.
the whole uncertainty thing, the whole concept that you can't measure where it is and the speed of its motion at the same time. Was that, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't know. I don't know how many people would listen to that and care. Like, it's just a cool thing to listen to.
Which is
but
fine.
when I knew the concept behind it, just from the title of the song, and I heard it, I was like, oh, it's like a soundscape representation of what that would look like, I thought that was really cool.
It's not smooth and legato. The inspiration behind it was the idea of when you have particles that can either be in one quantum shell or another one, and there's no middle ground in the quantum mechanics theory idea. Those, in fact, that's what quantum means, and it's parceled into discrete packages, and then it can be there or it can be there, and that middle bit not existing, pretty much randomly jumping between the two. I mean, hopefully musically it's not quite randomly, but it's meant to be a bit uncomfortable and unpredictable.
My head around the theory, but I can play the songs.
Well, I mean, there are again a bunch of things. So what you said, it can be here or it can be there. My son, this is completely, it's not connected at all to the fact that we were going to have this conversation. He just kind of randomly, we have these conversations every once in a while. He said, have you ever thought about the fact that you could be looking at something, and when you turn your head to look at the next thing, what happens in between, you can't process it. You can't see it.
That is very interesting. So I've got a neuroscience interest and background, and if you think back to a few decades ago, where there was a tendency with action films to have like a camera that just follows the action, with the idea being as if you were a participant in the events, and so everything is very whiz bang confusing. But actually that's not how our vision works at all. Our vision works by you focus on a point and you jump, and then you focus on a new point. You don't see that blurry bit between that. Our brains cut that out.
Right.
And then the world you feel you live in, there is it's obviously inspired by what you see in your senses and what comes in through your senses, plus also your pre-existing beliefs and prejudices and thoughts and moods. But the world you kind of live in is built up from these tiny little snapshots, and we only see clearly a very small part of our visual field, and the rest is quite an impressionistic blur that our brain then constructs into something that feels like a coherent reality. I do believe there is a coherent reality out there, just that we are not directly sensorily connected to it. So the idea of those visual saccades, the guy moving with the jumps and not seeing in between, is a really important thing in the neuroscience of visual system.
See, this is how we write songs. Songs stem from ideas like this. That's where the ideas come from.
You say that, and the only reason I laugh is because when we had our last conversation, I was blown away at just that, what you just said. The fact that it's actually spot on.
And the other aim with that track, if you imagine a pointillistic painting, something a bit similar going on there with these little staccato dots of stuff going on, to gradually build up a picture out of little dots. And the idea that the individual dots seem quite chaotic, and then as the piece evolves, gradually that then transforms into something that's then, I mean, it becomes then more conventional in terms of melody and structure. And the idea with that was representing that actually these fleeting little dots that 1 minute appear and disappear in a world that makes sense to us can be created on what seems such flimsy foundations of particles that pop into existence and disappear seemingly capriciously.
This is all about the uncertainty principle. It's all about uncertainty and chaos. And to what extent do you use that in creating the music? I mean, have you tried something like the John Cage used the stochastic processes, the mathematical process of probability?
Bringing in the random elements. We haven't. I think happy accidents of errors have been personal failures, as in it's like I might make a mistake and then think, oh, that's interesting, I might want to use that, rather than something that's been deliberately introduced. But I do think that idea of the iterative being a key part of our creative process in the music and the art and the whole concepts of the albums. The idea that the technology feeds into how you respond to it, and then what you do then affects what then the technology does with the next level, and then you're building up and creating things through layers of interaction.
There's certain elements that I use now because I've started using some modular stuff, modular synths, and some of those modules do have that random rolling the dice element to it. So sometimes if I'm stuck for something, I will actually roll the dice and see what comes up. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I can't do that with a string instrument because, that's just the thing that I've got to play. But especially with technology, as Malcolm says, I think there's more scope with technology to have that random element come in, especially with soundscapey sort of thing.
I mean, John Cage did it in 1951. So there is a way to do it. But I think, based on what you're saying, and you can tell me if I'm misinterpreting, but it sounds to me like that would be a little more forced than what you do. You're just putting an input, seeing what comes back, and then responding to that. Whereas some people write a piece of music and they say, okay, you're the bass player, here's your part, and here's you're the we're going to program the drums to do this thing, and that's a lot more prescribed. Whereas what you're saying is, I've got an idea, I'm going to bounce it off you, you're going to bounce back, and we're going to keep bouncing back and forth until we're happy. Whereas again, another step in a different direction would be saying, okay, I'm going to put in that an A note is equal to this number, and then I'm going to roll the dice, and if that number comes up, I play an A.
I mean, we haven't done anything thus far like that last one you described, but the thing of, it's usually that I will draft an idea, send it to Mark, then his responses, both musically and also, whether he's enthusiastic or not, or what he says, will also then affect what I do then in my next draft. So he'll then send me a batch of files, and then I will play with them, manipulate them. I might turn some bits from audio into MIDI, or
actually that happens quite a lot. Sometimes I'll say send a bass part, and Malcolm will go, oh, that's really good, but maybe not in this part of the song, or even this song, and it should be maybe a cello part. So he'll change it. So what I've written will then become something else further down the line, and then maybe be a starting block for something else. So
one of the things I find quite relaxing about working with Mark, because I'm not a very socially confident person in terms of interactions relating to conflict. I find those very stressful, and I could quite understand there would be plenty of people who, if they sent their finely honed part, and you said, "Well, yeah, I really like it, but I've changed all the notes and I've instead put it on a didgeridoo synthesizer," that might then be an awkward conversation. But Mark's very tolerant of me playing around, like I see often the various parts that we've got as like a palette, which I can then draw on and use in different pieces, whether it's different pieces or different parts of pieces, and I feel quite free to experiment and mess around with the stuff without worrying about it leading to conflict.
Yeah, I think we use sounds to kind of elicit different emotions and things, don't we? So they're a dark sound, or they're a percussive sound, or a long sound, and that will give you a certain emotion depending on what the song is dictating.
Trapped beneath the waves, haunted by their fleet, the burning lifeless air, still waiting for orders to decide to launch. But you were the third with the key, the pressure above, around and inside, and you said no. We don't know who we are till we're forced to decide.
I heard this song, I'm looking at my notes, unexpectedly raw sounding, especially on the guitar. That was at the beginning. But then you take that, and it's actually, it reminded me of how I often explain dissonance to my students. Like, we put an ugly sound, quote unquote, in a piece of music. It's so that the beautiful parts sound more beautiful.
Yes.
If not only that, I realize I'm limiting it to but that was kind of the thing. Like when I heard the backing vocals and the flute and all that, I was like, this is like beautiful. But I think you feel height if you come from a deeper level, if that makes sense. So you start off with this really raw thing, and I was like, wow, I was not expecting that. I was not expecting to just come in with like a crunching guitar sound. Because you used distortion earlier, but it was a fuller, I don't know how else to say it, a little bit more produced sound. This sounded...
Yeah. I mean, it was intended to be partly a more retro, distorted, metally guitar solo type sound, but also there's a kind of, not exactly glitchiness to it, but they are underneath the sea with all the electronics going wrong. The machines aren't working properly. There's meant to be something that's abrasive.
The next song comes, and it's Between Two Worlds. Right? And I thought, okay, I'm waiting. There's going to be something where you're going to hit an odd note that I wasn't expecting. There's going to be something, and it's just a beautiful song. I mean, the piano and the vocal, just really so well done.
Code in the machine, between two worlds, hydrogen flips, painting by numbers, the grip of the crab displayed in the shadows, double exposure on a future screen, between two worlds, another me.
It was so hard to do that song.
Yeah, that was the most difficult one on the album.
It was the most difficult one on the album.
Really?
We tried it. Yeah, absolutely. To try and get that emotion across.
We tried lots of different arrangement options, and in the initial thought was it being just piano and vocals. I'm not hugely confident always with my singing, and it's maybe easier sometimes to sing something that's belting and punchy, rather than and with lots of instruments around it and lots of harmonies, giving it loads of support to hide any imperfections. But this one doesn't give you anywhere to hide. Trying to keep the timing so that you don't want it to feel that it's just wayward and wrong, but also don't want it to sound metronomic.
Right.
Yeah.
We want it to
you
sound.
have to have that flow to it and that kind of slight push and pull.
Yeah, wanting it to sound spontaneous. Right. But then actually, for me, technically, that's quite hard to do that. So that you're doing the piano part and doing the voice
separately.
Without separately, but getting that same push and pull without actually having it being somebody else playing it that you can make eye contact with. Just trying to remember what you did, but eventually, I think we got something we were.
Yeah,
we were
it is tricky. Sometimes people think the songs with all the stuff is the hard part, but actually sometimes it's those sort of naked bare bits that are make sound great.
Between two worlds, another me in another place, in another life with opposite news. I'm waiting to see.
I think for anybody watching this and curious about your music, I think they'll have a good idea of what they might be able to expect when they decide to listen to it, and hopefully this will encourage people to listen.
Thank you. And also, even if people have found all this somewhat abstract stuff entirely uninteresting, I would hope that the music also stands on its own without
its own merits. Yeah,
if you see what I mean. So I'm hoping that what we do works on the level of that we have hopefully interesting stories, interesting concepts that inspire the music, and it comes together as a package. But also, if it's just a track and somebody likes it and they want to have it on their exercise playlist, that's also great. We are very much not purist about how our music is consumed.
Probably all the albums we've done, actually, to make sure they all just have a sort of light and shade, fast and slow, not too many vocal ones next to each other, not too many instrumental ones next to each other. So it's
one of the things I like about the fact that you guys post this on Bandcamp, because if you put it on, I mean, you might be on Spotify or whatever.
Yeah, we're on Spotify as well.
But something like Spotify really doesn't lend to being able to listen to music that way. It's more difficult to do anyway.
When Mark's saying, we are big fans of the concept of albums, as in we still think that is a medium that is artistically relevant. The idea of a long form piece of music the made up of shorter pieces that has a journey. And we do enjoy that with other people who produce albums, but we understand that people won't always listen in that way.
I'm thinking of a couple of people that I've spoken with. There's Stan Stewart, who I thought about quite a bit as I was listening to your music. I think you might enjoy some of his music as well. It's really some really nice music. He goes by Muse for Now, MUZ for the number now. We were talking about the idea of tension and release in music. And he was saying, well, there's also tension and tension. There's also there's not a release, and just being comfortable with accepting that.
I'm not afraid of dissonance. I'm not afraid of dissonance in music, and I'm not afraid of dissonance in life. I think it happens a lot, and I think that the problem is that we get this idea, both musically and in life, that the way to take care of dissonance is to resolve it.
Hmm.
And that's not always true.
And I thought about that a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Thinking about your music with especially when you talked about that fact, if you can learn to live with uncertainty. When I heard that line, I went back and listened to it again. I thought, oh, that's a great concept there. And it made me think of Stan. Guys, thank you again for your time, and thanks for your generosity with your answers and the conversation.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Many thanks for your support.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for that.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, speak again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.